Knoxville is one of the most populated cities in East Tennessee, and it's hard to believe how many people call the city home. From the hustle and bustle of downtown areas like Gay Street and Market Square to the quiet and breathtaking views of World's Fair Park, Knoxville has certainly grown over the years. But with this growth comes some challenges, including crowded infrastructure, rising rent prices, and urban sprawl. This raises the question, how did we get here? Why do so many people draw to Knoxville? And what are some potential solutions that can help the city thrive? Today we'll be discussing the 5 main topics.
Why do people move and travel to Knoxville? What causes overcrowded infrastructure? What causes rent and housing prices to increase? The expansion of urban sprawl? And what are some potential solutions to help solve these issues?
Beginning with the question, what is it about Knoxville that attracts so many people to live and travel to Knoxville from a historical but also modern viewpoint?
So for Knoxville, its history has always been that it's been a major city in the Tennessee Valley. And part of that is because of its location along the river, centrally located in what's now the state of Tennessee. And so for Knoxville, it's equidistance to a lot of the different mercantile centers or economic centers along the East Coast. And so when things started spreading west of Knoxville, it was a good kind of in-between place. So interstates interchanged here, railroads interchanged here, roads kind of crossed here. And so the nice thing is it's a good distance, in a positive way, being a good distance to all the different places that people need to go. And so it's always sort of been that way. It was the first capital of Tennessee. It was the first city that people kind of established and lived in what's now Tennessee. And so it's continued to grow. And most of what has allowed Knoxville's growth has played off of that geographic and economic position.
Yeah, so some of the big draw points for Knoxville specifically, I would start with the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, which is not necessarily in Knoxville, but it's well within our region, and the park is the most visited national park in the country. So we have that essentially, on the one side. Our community is surrounded by 7 lakes that are within about an hour from downtown, and so that is a huge draw. Variety of other outdoor activities, from Windrock, which is one of the larger off-roading and all-terrain vehicle parks in the country, to numerous campsites and natural areas surrounding the city. And then when you look at Knoxville as a whole, there are really 3 main employers that are bringing in talent from all over the country and all over the world, and those are TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, ORNL, Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and then the University of Tennessee. The UT system is based here in Knoxville.
As Knoxville continues to grow, one of its most visible signs of rapid expansion is traffic congestion. What used to be a city where you can move around quickly has now become a challenge for residents and visitors alike. For long commutes on the highways to crowded streets downtown, traffic has become a daily frustration for many. The city's infrastructure was designed for a smaller population. With this influx of new residents, Knoxville is facing the strain of keeping up. How exactly did traffic become such a problem? And what does this mean for the future of Knoxville? To understand this issue better, let's look at some factors that might contribute to Knoxville's traffic challenges.
Anytime that you develop a new form of anything, it's exciting. You try to anticipate what the future need may be, but I think that's very difficult to do. So for instance, the interstates are built according to what was needed in the 1950s, 60s, and early 70s. And so the capacity space-wise to accommodate the amount of traffic coming through Knoxville and connecting people and places has been always a challenge, as it is in any metropolitan area. But also, most of those forms of infrastructure like interstates are now aging out, so they're needing to do repair work. So you have a lot of construction issues, and how do you time that, how do you do that? And so I think that's part of the infrastructure. I think that people in this area are used to driving and prefer driving to public transit. And so that's always a challenge, and it's very expensive to install public transit. And so there's always the economic trade-off, and then you're always kind of having to respond to what the public is typically wanting to do.
I personally am most interested in infrastructure as a kind of the engine to move our city forward. The Knoxville Chamber of Commerce is talking right now about, they use the term that Governor Phil Bredesen used, talking about civic furniture. That's literally the infrastructure that people can use to come together in an urban environment. When we talk about civic furniture, it's literally how do we have better infrastructure that will bring people from all walks of life into our community and bring them together. In the post-war era, so between 1946 and we'll say 1976, Knoxville tore down a lot of its city infrastructure and replaced it with some key projects that removed a lot of the land that was where we lived and worked as Knoxvillians. So that looked like 40 going through the middle of town, and that looked like an expansion of industrial use to replace factories, but also that ended up replacing a lot of places to live and also separately other businesses. That looked like the University of Tennessee taking a large swath of land, which is, I think, pretty notable. And then that also looked like urban renewal, which displays people predominantly African American in our city and many others across the country. But when you look at all of that removal of infrastructure, it's left a big hole, and I think that what we're experiencing now is an opportunity to backfill, to go back and kind of undo a lot of those decisions.
Another key issue Knoxville is currently facing is influenced by the influx of new residents. It's the rising cost of rent and housing. Like many other growing cities, Knoxville has experienced similar challenges. However, the pressing question isn't what we as residents can do, but what our steps city officials can take to address and potentially solve this issue.
As far as addressing housing and rent costs, it's a basic economic problem. We have an abundance of individuals who demand housing, and we have a lacking supply of adequate housing and a lacking supply of opportunities or options for individuals who live in our community currently. So that means that we have really high prices, because when demand is high and supply is low, that drives prices up. So, missing middle has been a big push by our city's mayor. I'm seeing a lot of adaptive reuse of historic structures for housing. Space that was very useful as mixed-use commercial and residential land use, and reverting it back. So, removing parking lots downtown. Oh, well, what do we do about the cars? It's like, well, we have something like 15,000 parking spaces downtown, and only about 4,000 people live there. Maybe more people can live there, and then not as many people will have to drive. And I'm all for parking that's free and easy, but at the same time, I think I'd rather we have houses that people can afford if we had to pick between one or the other. And when you look at that, yes, land use is that simple in that it's a trade-off. Anything you use the land for, unless you do mixed use and multi-level, you kind of get to pick one or the other. And hey, if we do mixed use and multi-level on top of the parking garages, I have no issue with that either. But if we have to pick one or the other, I'm always going to pick long-term affordable housing by making investments now.
Having discussed two of Knoxville's major challenges, another significant challenges arise beyond the city itself: urban sprawl. This refers to the expansion of new housing developments into surrounding areas like Hardin Valley and Farragut. The problem lies in the roadways, which struggle to accommodate the increase in traffic and population. This raises an important question: what causes urban sprawl to occur in the first place?
The idea of a place being disintegrated, so that place is not clear anymore. The idea of urban sprawl is essentially that there's a city, and then as you continue to progress out, it's less and less and less a city. And then at some point, it's not a city any longer. You'd be out in an area that's rural. Okay. So when we talk about something that's suburban, it's less than urban. What's a bit difficult about that is that the zoning ordinance in the United States, certainly in Knoxville, keeping places as place types separate from each other. So you look at Knoxville, okay, you've got the city, okay, and then in Knox County you have the city of Knoxville and you have the town of Farragut, okay. What do you call everything else? Well, Advanced Knox is a solution right now that the community is looking towards of, okay, let's redefine some of the zoning ordinance. I still don't think it satisfies the basic question of, okay, what do we need to live, work, and eat, okay? How does that fit together to become a place type that is cohesive? The previous zoning ordinance is very much, okay, you live over here and you work over here and you've got to go from one to the other. Well, that creates traffic, right? And then you kind of eat at home maybe, and hopefully you'll have a grocery store in your community. The difference that we look at between urban planning and just zoning different place types is urban planning is focused on the integration of your life into the needs that you have within the area that you live. What's funny to me is that that's how everybody's lived for all of human history in cities. And we've, in the last 50 some odd years, let's say 70 some odd years back to that post-war era, we've forgotten that. And we've put the places that we work very far away from the places that we live. And then we're confused when we see that it takes forever to get from one to the other. We're confused when we see kids not playing outside because there's nowhere for them to play, there's nowhere for them to go that's safe. All the things that we wrap up in this idea of urban sprawl, I think are the same as our misunderstandings about diet. You're not hungry because the food you need. You're hungry because you lack the nutrition. And you look at the system of an urban landscape, we're not getting what we need in the way that things are organized, and therefore we're continuing to see houses and businesses spill out into farms, which should be raising food for us. We'd hope to get food in our community from farmers. And the more land that we take up because we haven't planned the city well, the less we are able to gain the nutrition and the satisfaction we need from our community as a whole.
Knoxville is a city that continues to expand and grow with more and more people choosing to travel or move here. Like many other growing cities in the U.S., it faces the challenges of overcrowded infrastructure, rising rent prices, and the ongoing struggle between urban sprawl and updating roadways to accommodate the influx of new residents. While there isn't a one-size-fits-all to all these issues, the question remains, what could be the first steps towards addressing these issues effectively?
Well, I think part of it is to communicate and to actually be civically involved. What is being debated on the City Council, what's being proposed, also to understand how is the Department of Transportation work and understand how different administrations deal with these issues, because a lot of what happens with the Department of Transportation has to do with civic input as well. Because most of the work that's being done on the interstates anyway is a state level and with state communications and decision making and prioritizing. And so being involved civically and understanding what's going on and what is being proposed development wise, because again the city is taking an active role in looking at what are they hoping will happen with whether it's traffic, roads, whether it's public transportation, or whether it's development. In this administration, they're taking active action, and so attending and listening and being a part of that conversation is probably the best step to take. And then participating and sharing if you have ideas, and if you support those that reflect your ideas, then that's the best way to make a difference.
So what I think is important to start out with is, as I said earlier, what's the root cause? So the root cause is we tore down 500 acres of our city minimum. So when you lose 500 acres of your city, right, what happens next? If our downtown that we know right now is something like 300 acres, right? Sequoia Hills is 800 or some odd acres. Okay, so our city could be the same size as Sequoia Hills if we didn't do all that. And actually much bigger, because what happened was the interstate separated the city such that there's the core that we know is downtown Knoxville now, But then there are all these other parts that are separated from the city because of the way that the interstate cuts through, because of the way that urban renewal cut through, because of the way that the University of Tennessee just cut down so much of that infrastructure. And so now what we're dealing with is, the practical ramifications of tearing down our city. We don't have enough city for the people who want to live here. Reversing those decisions is going to take time, right? If a problem took 70 years to create, it's probably going to take a few to fix. But I think the lowest hanging fruit options are continuing to create integrated development. And what integrated development is it's a development that works together with the ecosystem, if you will, that's around it. It's a place that you can live, work, and eat. So we have this idea in Knoxville, right, that there's a new restaurant practically to go to every week, and my wife and I have enjoyed that a whole lot. There are almost more restaurants here per capita than anywhere else in the country. That being said, if it's hard to get to those restaurants, or those restaurants are closing because they don't have consistent customers, well, that doesn't work. The idea of live is primarily, spend that time with your family, spend that time with your friends, and get adequate sleep. So the thing about the way that we're living right now is I can walk out of my house in West Knoxville and I can hear cars humming on the interstate. But I would look at the way that we've built things as continuing the problem that I can't get where I want to go without a tax called upkeep on a car. It's even harder for somebody who is trying to figure out, hey, I'm a student. How do I get a place to live that I can then also get to UT? It's even harder when somebody's trying to hold down a job and they're realizing, hey, I can't get where I want to go and work the way I want to work. I think that it's a gradual building back up of the infrastructure that we have in our community, and a building back up of places that work in concert, as opposed to a general idea that we're effectively all doing our own thing and hoping it works out for the best of everyone else.
With that, Knoxville does still have its issues like any other growing city in the US, but despite its rapid expansion, the city still holds on to its small town feel. The sense of community combined with the natural beauty of the nearby Smokies makes Knoxville stand out as one of the best places to live in the US.